All right. So we wanted to go ahead and get together and talk about the new MCP 2.0 update, how Ammo Studio has been incorporated into our workflows, and just our first impressions using it. I have Kayleigh and Joseph, some of our expert Webflow developers in-house, and they've been using it, testing it out, seeing how they've been enjoying it. We wanted to just get started and start talking about how it's changed our workflows. Some big notable things about this new update is that it's dropped the bridge application needed to be able to interact with the Webflow designer, as well as the CMS, and being able to actually move more agentically. Joseph, what are some examples of how you've incorporated this into your workflow, how you've been able to get some real productivity gains so far just in this first few weeks?
Yeah, it is a whole lot nicer not having to set up the Bridge app on every single site. I was using MCP 1 for a little bit earlier. And I think the biggest thing I've noticed with them dropping the Bridge app is the speed. It seems like, at least with Claude Code, it can query the Webflow styles and elements a whole lot faster. And when it's making, like 100 tool calls over a session, like every little bit of performance increase there like adds up. The
Mhm.
old MCP was really slow. If you wanted it to look up a style on a certain element, that would take maybe a minute or two, and it takes you 10 seconds to do it yourself. So that was kind of like a point of friction that really made me not use the original MCP too much.
Mhm.
Um, Currently, I'm still using the MCP like alongside while I'm editing in the designer myself, but I think this would kind of make it more powerful to work on sites, maybe like headless or delegate tasks out that you don't have to babysit once we have like a little more trust in the product.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Essentially, it just reduces all the friction of being able to step in and actually get something done. Um, Kayleigh, have you noticed any big gains for you?
Sorry, I'm muted. I think it's super cool that it works between more than one site. So you're able to like talk to multiple sites at once. And it's also cool for analytics where you're able to just talk to it in plain English and see how your site is doing. So for people who aren't too technical and don't want to look at all the graphs, you can just talk to it and see how everything is going.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it syncs really nicely with optimize and analyze. Since now that you guys have been working with it, what would you say has been some key things you've learned in terms of writing instructions for agents, creating skills, defining rules? What are some key takeaways you've already had so far?
I think the best thing about skills or rules would be that we can kind of add some more guardrails onto a site. And maybe an example of this would be working within a specific framework like client first. We could include in those skills that always write class names and client first, look at the site, load into context that this is a client first site. So when it sees a bunch of stacked classes, it knows what's going on. And then we don't have to continuously remind the model of that every single time we write a prompt. Um, like another good use case would be writing custom code, like using the MCP alongside writing custom code. Because again, I can like query things within the designer and reference that in my custom code. So it's good to kind of set some rules on how exactly we want that to interact. Like maybe only hook everything up to data attributes, don't target classes specifically because those could change, things like that. It's just kind of nice to write that once and not have to continuously remind the model over and over again and correct it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kayleigh, have you found anything that's been kind of beneficial for you?
There are some rules that you can add, like nobody don't ever touch the pricing page, no matter what. Like, do not do
Oh,
anything on this page. Um, Always make sure that you're using the brand voice and tone that you put in. So it always matches everything that you're trying to say. Also telling it like you can never push the site live unless somebody's actually checking it first.
mhm.
It's like that. You don't want the site to go live with an
Yeah.
agent touching it, without double checking that everything works properly.
Yeah, those are great call outs. It sounds like it's been really helpful for just risk management, being able to ensure that you guys get that final sign off and quality is always kind of front center. Kind of building off of that, governance and being able to really have, full auditability of the site within a quick query to an agent. How has that really, changed the way you look at day-to-day work for you guys?
I think the new MCP works in branches a lot better. That's pretty important, especially on enterprise builds where we have that functionality. Anytime we're like evaluating a new tool like this, we don't just want to let it loose on the entire site. So I think having the ability to use the MCP on branches specifically is pretty helpful to that because we can create kind of like an isolated environment.
Mhm.
Um, Even if we're making a small change, it's good to do on a branch, but especially if we want to test and see exactly how much we can do with the MCP, we can let it loose on the branch. If something goes wrong and it messes up the entire site, it's not a big deal. We can just delete the branch and nothing on the main site is affected. So I think that's pretty powerful now that we can use the branches. I haven't dug too much into the like audit log, but it doesn't seem like too much of an improvement over the existing Webflow audit log. I think it just tags kind of the requests or things you would do in Webflow yourself, but it just tags them as coming from the MCP.
Mm. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So just a little bit of additional insight there, and then having that, branch-based iteration kind of brings some of those traditional CI/CD pipelines to Webflow, which has been very much been asked by the community for some time now. Kayleigh, have you found anything, helpful for you so far?
Honestly, I would say I agree with everything Joseph just said.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think that definitely covers it. Um, Well, I think that kind of wraps up our first impressions. Really happy to get to kind of work with you guys and hear what you've thought so far, and we're really excited to just kind of see how Webflow iterates on it. That
Yeah, it's
concludes.
definitely a big improvement over what they had before.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.